Think back to Kiowa Island, 2021. The ocean spray, the impossible flop shots, the sheer magic of it. Phil Mickelson, at 50 years old, becoming the oldest major winner in history. That roar as he walked up the 18th fairway, fans chasing him like he was a rock star. He was the people's champion. Fast forward to 2026. He's 56 now, but the music has stopped. The cheers have turned to whispers, and somewhere along the way the love affair ended. Not because of a bad swing, not because of his age. Something else happened this year. Something that started in exclusive places, behind doors we weren't allowed to see. And when the truth started leaking out, it didn't just turn heads, it turned stomachs. This isn't about LIV Golf. It isn't about the gambling stories we've all heard before. This is about behavior. Behavior that made the very clubs he belonged to decide they wanted nothing to do with him. Behavior that explains why he's been disappearing from major championships he used to never miss. The man who signed autographs until his hand cramped is gone. And in his place is someone golf fans don't even recognize. Think about what that means for a moment. Phil Mickelson wasn't just any player. He was the guy who connected with fans better than anyone. He waved to every section of the crowd. He threw golf balls into the stands like confetti. He made you feel like you were part of his journey, not just a spectator. That connection took 30 years to build. And now, in the span of a few months, it's all gone. Disappeared like a bad putt that lips out on the final hole. The question that haunts every golf fan is simple but brutal. How did we get here? This year, at 56, he didn't just lose a tournament. He lost something far more permanent. Respect. The question is, what caused such a sudden, brutal shift? Was it one incident, or a lifetime of bad decisions finally catching up? Here's my honest take. I think fans gave him a pass for the Saudi move. They looked past the billion-dollar gambling habit. But this involves how he treated people. People in positions who trusted him. And when the stories came out, the golf world couldn't look away. Do you agree that this crossed a line? Or do you think we're too quick to cancel legends? Tell me in the comments. And if you want the unvarnished truth about what he actually did, make sure you're subscribed. Because the full story involves more than one golf club, more than one woman, and a pattern that's almost impossible to defend. That pattern didn't start in 2026. It had been building for years, quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. Most golf fans remember the shift in 2022, the year Phil shocked everyone by joining LIV Golf, the year he took $200 million from a Saudi-backed league, and the year he said something that made people question everything they thought they knew about him. He called the Saudis scary motherfuckers. That was his exact word. He knew the human rights concerns. He knew about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. But then he said something even more damaging. He said it was worth it. Worth it to get leverage against the PGA Tour. Worth it to reshape the game. That moment split the fan base right down the middle. Some saw a rebel fighting the system. Others saw a hypocrite selling out everything he claimed to stand for. The truth is, Phil had spent his entire career being the anti-Tiger. He was the guy who talked to everyone. He was the guy who took the hard path, who played aggressive golf, who wore his heart on his sleeve. Fans loved him because he felt real. He felt like one of us. But that authenticity took a massive hit when he took that Saudi money. Because you can't claim to stand for integrity while taking blood money from a regime that murders journalists. The contradiction was too stark to ignore. And for many fans, that was the first time they looked at Phil and didn't recognize the man staring back. Then came the gambling revelations. Over $1 billion wagered over 30 years. Losses estimated at over $100 million. That alone would have ruined most athletes' reputations. But Phil survived that too. Fans looked the other way. He was still lefty. Still the guy who high-fived strangers and gave balls to kids. The love was too deep to disappear overnight. But those incidents did something dangerous. They created a crack in the armor. A small one, barely visible. Enough for fans to start questioning his judgment. Enough for them to wonder what else was hiding behind that charming smile. And then, sponsors started pulling away. KPMG, Amstel Light, Workday. One by one, they cut ties. Each departure was a tiny wound, but collectively they added up to something real. Phil was bleeding respect, and he didn't even seem to notice. Think about what it means when a company like KPMG walks away. These aren't small brands. These are billion-dollar corporations that have done their homework. They know more about their sponsored athletes than we ever will. And when they decide the risk isn't worth it, That's a warning sign. A flashing red light that something is wrong. Phil should have seen it. He should have changed course. Instead, he just kept going, convinced he was untouchable. By 2025, he was still a legend. But he was a wounded legend. The aura of invincibility was gone. And when 2026 rolled around, the cracks began to widen into canyons, because that's when the silence started. The strange, deafening silence from a man who never seemed to shut up about anything. He stopped talking. He stopped showing up. And that's when golf fans really started paying attention. Losing sponsors and respect was one thing, but watching him vanish from the game he loved, that was something else entirely. The question nobody could answer was simple. Where did Phil Mickelson actually go? That question became impossible to ignore as the 2026 season unfolded. For decades, Phil Mickelson never missed a major. He played through injuries, bad weather, and personal crises. But this year was different. In April, he skipped the Masters, citing a family health issue. Fans accepted it. Family comes first. Then came the PGA Championship in May. He was absent again. The same reason, family health. People started raising eyebrows. Then June arrived, and the US Open came and went without him. But this time, there was a different excuse. He didn't have a qualifying exemption anymore. The golf world began to whisper. Then July hit, and the British Open rolled around. Phil didn't show up. For the first time since 1994, he voluntarily missed the Open Championship. The last time he missed it was in 2009 when his wife Amy was fighting breast cancer. That was understandable. This felt different. He had missed all 4 majors in a single year. In his entire career, that had never happened before. Not even close. A man who once played with a broken bone in his hand was now disappearing from the biggest stages in golf. The official story stayed the same. Private family health matters. But the whispers grew louder. People in the golf media started asking questions. Why would a man who loves competition suddenly stop competing? Why would a man who thrived on the biggest moments run away from them? The excuses felt thin. The silence felt heavy. And the fans started connecting dots that didn't quite line up. What made this even stranger was the contrast with his past. This was the same Phil who famously played the 2010 Masters with a broken pinky finger. The same Phil who battled through exhaustion and injuries to win the 2013 Open Championship. He never quit. He never backed down. That was his brand, his identity. And now he was doing exactly the opposite. He was running, hiding, disappearing. The man who never gave up was giving up on everything. The man who lived for Sunday afternoons was suddenly nowhere to be found. The obvious question was staring everyone in the face. What was he so afraid of? The answer didn't come from Phil himself. It came from journalists, who refused to let the story die. Reporters started digging into his private life. Not his gambling, not his LIV money, something else. Something that involved the places where he spent his time away from the cameras. Exclusive golf clubs where members pay millions just to walk through the doors. Places where the rules are unwritten but strictly enforced. And places where Phil Mickelson had been a regular for years. Then came the first crack in the wall. Reports surfaced about an incident at the Farms Golf Club in California, a place Phil had belonged to for a long time. According to sources, something happened between Phil and a female staff member, something involving inappropriate physical contact. Non-consensual, they said. The club didn't sweep it under the rug. They launched an investigation, and when they finished, they did something almost unthinkable. They walked up to Phil on the course, in the middle of a round, and told him to leave. Immediately, the club later released a statement saying they had taken decisive action after a thorough investigation. Phil's lawyers fired back, claiming he resigned before they could kick him out. That moment was a massive blow to his reputation. But it turned out the Farms was just the warm-up act. Because once journalists started pulling on that thread, the whole sweater unraveled. Scratch. A golf media outlet published an explosive investigation. They had spoken to 19 sources, 19 people who knew Phil, worked with him, or witnessed his behavior firsthand. And what they uncovered painted a picture that horrified even the most loyal fans. It turned out, the Farms wasn't the only club that had problems with Phil. 2 other exclusive clubs, the Madison Club and the Bridges, had also made it clear he was no longer welcome. 3 clubs in total. 3 places that had once welcomed the 6-time major champion with open arms now wanted nothing to do with him. But the most damaging revelation came from one woman brave enough to speak publicly. Her name is Ashley Perez. She was married to Pat Perez, a former PGA Tour player. And she had a story that made people's blood run cold. She said that back in 2015, at the Barclays tournament, Phil Mickelson approached her while her husband was away. He showed her a photo on his phone. He told her it was his wife, except it wasn't. It was a photo of himself, naked from the waist down. He then told her he would leave his bedroom door open that night, and when her husband fell asleep, she was welcome to come find him. Ashley was 27 years old at the time. She called the experience grooming. She said she was young and naive and didn't know how to respond. She held on to that story for years before finally finding the courage to share it. When she did, she wrote that she was standing up for the millions of women who had been silenced. The golf world exploded. This wasn't just inappropriate behavior. This was predatory. This was a pattern. And it stretched back for years. What made Ashley's story so devastating was the context. Phil was a married man, a father, a grandfather. He had built his entire public image around his family. He kissed his wife Amy after every victory. He dedicated wins to his mother, his siblings, his kids. That image was his shield, and Ashley's story pierced right through it. Suddenly, the family man looked like a fraud. The loving husband looked like a predator. The difference between the public Phil and the private Phil was so vast that fans felt personally deceived. They had been rooting for a ghost. Phil Mickelson had been called many things in his life: legend, champion, gambler, rebel. But nobody ever called him a predator. Until now. His team scrambled to respond. They called the scratch investigation a drive-by shooting filled with anonymous attacks. They claimed the photo was just a shirtless picture, not anything explicit. They insisted Phil had never been expelled from any club and had resigned voluntarily from all of them. They even said his willingness to apologize for past mistakes didn't mean he was guilty of the current accusations. His wife Amy released a statement standing by him. She said some accusations were false, but others were mistakes he had already admitted to, either publicly or privately. She chose to stay by his side with unwavering love. But the court of public opinion was already finished deliberating. The fans who had forgiven the Saudi money, looked past the billion-dollar bets, and defended his rebel status had finally reached their limit. This was the line. Sex misconduct crossed a boundary that LIV Golf and gambling never could. The people who once wore his hats and cheered his name now felt sick to their stomachs. Because he wasn't just a flawed player anymore, he was a symbol of broken trust. The family man who kissed his wife after every victory now looked like a facade, a carefully constructed mask that had finally slipped off. It also hurt that he had become a ghost. By skipping the majors, he had abandoned the fans who paid to see him. The defiant fighter who never quit was running away from the consequences. That act alone made the betrayal feel even sharper. The fans who stayed loyal to him through LIV now felt like fools. They had defended him. They had argued with friends about why he was right, and now they were left holding the bag for a man whose reputation was in ruins. Most players would try to win their fans back with a heartfelt apology and a return to the course. But for Phil, there was nowhere left to run and nowhere left to return to, because the kingdom he sold his soul for was crumbling too. In April 2026, the Wall Street Journal reported that Saudi Arabia's public investment fund planned to pull its financial backing from LIV Golf after the season ended. The league that paid him $200 million was falling apart. The rebellion he helped lead was becoming a footnote in golf history. He couldn't go back to the PGA Tour either. He had burned that bridge so completely that even if he begged, the door was welded shut. His sponsors had already abandoned him. KPMG, Amstel Light, Workday, they were all gone. So where did that leave him? At 56 years old, Phil Mickelson had no league to play for, no sponsors to pay him, no clubs that wanted him, and no fans to cheer him. The man who had won 6 major championships, who had authored the most magical moment in modern golf at Kiawah Island, was now a pariah, alone in a sport that had once worshipped him. The true tragedy isn't the lost sponsorships or the missing majors. It's the legacy. History will remember the incredible shots, the impossible flop shots, and the record-breaking championship. But it will also remember this: the shadow that now hangs over every single victory, the whispers that will follow him to the Hall of Fame, the knowledge that the man everyone loved wasn't the real him. He made a series of choices. Each one took him further from the person fans thought he was. And when he reached the edge, nobody was left to catch him. So here's the final question that every golf fan has to answer for themselves. Can you separate the player from the person? For many, the answer is already clear, and that's the most devastating verdict of all. If you want to stay ahead of this story as it continues to unfold, hit that subscribe button now, because trust me, this isn't over yet.